Welcome listeners to listen to the short story, Konstantin's Inheritance, a philosophical journey through ambition, disillusionment, and the discovery of true wealth in the simplicity of the earth. In the vast, intricate tapestry of 19th-century Russia, where the ancient stillness of the countryside often lay in stark contrast to the glittering, restless pulse of the imperial capital, a young nobleman, Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, embarked upon a life's journey. Born to the quiet dignity of a provincial estate, yet possessed of a formidable intellect and a boundless ambition, he was drawn inexorably towards the gleaming promise of St. Petersburg, convinced that true wealth resided in the accumulation of knowledge, the wielding of power, and the profound influence upon society. This chronicle shall unveil his fervent pursuit of these worldly aspirations, his subsequent profound disillusionment with their inherent emptiness, and his arduous, soul-searching descent into despair, before tracing his path towards an unexpected discovery of genuine purpose and the enduring richness found in the profound simplicity of the earth. Chapter 1. The Lure of Petersburg in a Young Man's Grand Designs. The early spring in the province of Tula, where the ancestral estate of the Volkov family lay nestled amidst rolling hills and ancient forests, dawned with a peculiar, almost premonitory stillness. The air, crisp and nascent, carried the lingering scent of melting snow, mingled with the earthy promise of newly awakened soil. For generations, this land, known simply as Otradnoy, a name meaning solace or consolation, which seemed to embody the very essence of its enduring peace, had been the crucible and comfort of the Volkovs. Its rhythms dictating their lives, its fields bearing the quiet testament to their existence, its very stones imbued with the silent history of their lineage. Here, beneath the vast, indifferent sky, amid the ceaseless unfolding of nature's cycles, Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, a young man then just beyond his 20th year, found himself on the precipice of a profound departure, his spirit alight with a fervent, almost uncontainable ambition that strained against the tranquil confines of his aristocratic upbringing. Konstantin was not merely a son of the land, though Otradnoy had shaped his earliest consciousness. He was, by the grace of his birth, a scion of the minor gentry, destined for a life beyond the immediate concerns of a peasant's field or the humdrum duties of provincial life. His upbringing had been one of genteel comfort, marked by the languid pace of country summers, when the manor pulsed with visitors and the air was sweet with the scent of linden blossoms, and the quiet, introspective routines of winter, when the world outside lay hushed beneath a blanket of snow. The ancestral manor, a rambling wooden edifice adorned with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors and the ghosts of forgotten conversations, was his childhood sanctuary. Its tall, narrow windows, often misted by rain or sparkling with frost, framed vistas of sprawling fields, dark, enigmatic forests, and the meandering river, a landscape of profound, enduring beauty that permeated his very being, though he knew not its full significance then. From an early age, Konstantin distinguished himself not by boisterousness or overt physical prowess, though he possessed a robust constitution inherited from generations of landowners and a natural athleticism that made him agile despite his intellectual bent. Rather, his remarkable, almost insatiable intellectual gift set him apart. His mind, like a finely tuned instrument, absorbed knowledge with an effortless grace that astonished his tutors and often bewildered his more conventional elder brother, Pavel Nikolaevich, while Pavel delighted in the hunt, in the management of the estate, in the tangible realities of their inherited world, the health of the serfs, the rotation of crops, the meticulous accounting of their meager income, Konstantin found his deepest pleasure, his true exhilaration, within the musty confines of the family library. Here, amidst towering shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, their pages crackling with age, his spirit soared. He devoured every book he could lay his hands on, from the ancient Greek tragedies of Aeschylus and Sophocles to the revolutionary scientific treatises of the Enlightenment, from the grand narratives of European history to the intricate philosophical arguments of Kant, Rousseau, and the burgeoning German idealists. He would spend hours lost in thought, the abstract concepts of pure reason and social contract swirling in his mind, often emerging from his studies with a flushed face and eyes alight with newfound understanding. Eager to debate, His early exposure to the ideas of philosophy and progress came not merely through dusty tomes, though they were a vital source, but through the infrequent, yet profoundly influential, visits of his eccentric maternal uncle, Dmitri Nikolaevich. Uncle Dmitri was a man of unconventional thought and restless spirit, who had spent much of his life serving in various minor government positions in Petersburg and traveling abroad. His mind a veritable wellspring of new, often radical, ideas. He would arrive at Otradnoye in his rattling carriage, usually late in the summer, bringing with him not only small, curious gifts from the city, delicate porcelain figures, intricately carved wooden boxes, but bundles of foreign journals, pamphlets on social reform, and spirited discussions on the ideals of liberty, equality, and the infinite perfectibility of man. He spoke of the great intellectual currents sweeping through Europe, of the need for Russia to awaken from its long, traditional slumber, to embrace reason and justice, to shed the shackles of serfdom and autocracy. Konstantin, a wide-eyed and eager listener, absorbed these conversations like a thirsty sponge. He would sit for hours, hidden in the shadows of the drawing room, a silent, attentive observer, enthralled by the fervent, sometimes heated, debates between his urbane uncle and his traditionalist father, Nikolai Petrovich. His father, a man of deep, conservative convictions, revered tradition above all else, believing in the immutability of the established order, finding profound solace in the practical demands of his estate and the unwavering tenets of the Orthodox Church. He dismissed his brother-in-law's ideas as dangerous Western influences, incompatible with the unique spirit of Holy Russia. Their arguments, though always conducted with a veneer of aristocratic politeness, a careful adherence to social decorum, nevertheless revealed a fundamental chasm between two worlds: the ancient, unchanging world of the Russian landowner, bound by custom and inherited duty, and the burgeoning, restless world of modern thought, yearning for revolution and enlightenment. It was in these moments, listening to the clash of ideologies, that the seeds of Konstantin's grand designs were sown. He found himself increasingly aligning with his uncle's progressive ideals, dreaming not of merely managing his inherited lands, or of improving the lot of his serfs through paternalistic benevolence, but of transforming Russia itself, of contributing to a new age of enlightenment and justice on a national scale. He saw the potential for greatness, not in the quiet dignity of rural life, which he now viewed as somewhat stagnant, but in the vibrant intellectual ferment of the city, in the gilded halls of power where ideas were forged, laws drafted, and destinies shaped. He believed, with the fervent idealism and boundless optimism of youth, that true wealth lay not in accumulated rubles or vast, fertile estates, but in the boundless treasures of intellect, in the acquisition of power to effect meaningful change, and in the profound influence one could exert upon society, shaping its very direction, guiding it towards a brighter future. His own father, Nikolai Petrovich, a man of profound practicality and inherited wisdom, observed Konstantin's burgeoning intellectual pursuits with a mixture of quiet pride and vague unease. He valued learning, yes, for it was fitting for a nobleman to be well-read and articulate. But he also distrusted its more radical expressions, fearing that too much philosophy would lead to a disquieting restlessness, a disdain for the practical, tangible realities of life on the land, a dangerous detachment from the roots that sustained them. "Books are good, son," his father would often say, his voice measured, his gaze sweeping over the fields beyond their window. "But the earth, it teaches truths that no book, no learned professor, can convey: patience, endurance, humility before God's creation, the enduring cycle of life and death. Remember that, Konstantin. Petersburg may fill your head with grand ideas, but it cannot feed your soul. Only the soil can truly do that." His mother, Maria Alexeyevna, a woman of delicate constitution and profound, if often unarticulated, piety, worried even more deeply for her ambitious son. She saw the intense light in his eyes, the fervent, almost consuming passion that drove him, and feared for the fragility of his spirit in the harsh, unforgiving world beyond Otradnoye's protective embrace. She sought solace in constant prayer, her fragile hands perpetually clasped before the family icon, her heart filled with a silent plea for her son's spiritual well-being. On the day of his departure, she would place a small, intricately carved icon of the Mother of God, worn smooth by generations of prayer. Deep within Konstantin's travel bag, a silent, desperate plea for his protection from unseen dangers. A constant reminder of the sanctity of home. As Konstantin approached the age for university, the decision of his future became a focal point of intense family discussion. His father, while wishing his son to receive a proper education fitting for his station, envisioned a future in which Konstantin, after a brief, obligatory period of service in the imperial bureaucracy, would eventually return to Otradnoy, perhaps to manage the estate alongside Pavel, ensuring the continuity of their ancestral line. This was the traditional path, the expected fulfillment of a nobleman's duty. But Konstantin, fueled by his boundless intellectual ambitions and the persuasive arguments of Uncle Dmitri, who wrote fervent letters from Petersburg extolling the virtues of urban life, had grander visions. He saw the countryside, for all its beauty and its grounding simplicity, as a somewhat stagnant, provincial backwater, utterly incapable of satisfying the boundless potential of his restless mind. It was a place for repose, perhaps, but not for greatness. "Father," Konstantin argued one evening, his voice resonating with youthful conviction, his eyes burning with an inner fire, "my calling is not merely to manage fields, to count rubles and serfs, but to cultivate minds, to shape the very destiny of our nation. The greatest truths, the most profound changes, the very pulse of progress, are forged in the city, where ideas clash and evolve, where men of intellect gather to debate the future. Petersburg is the beating heart of Russia, the very crucible of its future. I must be there, to contribute, to learn, to make a difference that extends far beyond the narrow boundaries of our estate, beyond the quiet confines of provincial life." Nikolai Petrovich listened, his gaze fixed on his son, a profound sadness settling in his eyes, a weariness born of experience. He understood the lure, the intoxicating appeal of youthful ambition, the siren call of the city's promises. But he also sensed the potential for profound disillusionment, for the inevitable, painful collision between lofty ideals and the often brutal, unyielding realities of the wider world. He had seen young men, full of such fervor, return broken, their spirits extinguished. "The city, my son," he replied, his voice gentle but firm, carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, "is a dangerous place. It promises much, but often delivers only emptiness. Its wealth is often an illusion, a fleeting shadow, and its power, though seemingly absolute, can corrupt the soul. Remember the earth, Konstantin. It is honest, it hides nothing, its rewards are hard-won, but they are real, enduring, its truths are simple, but profound." But Konstantin, in the boundless optimism of his youth, dismissed his father's words as the cautious pessimism of a man rooted too deeply in tradition, too far removed from the vital, progressive currents of modern thought. He yearned for the intellectual ferment, the political debates, the societal influence that Petersburg promised. He believed, with an unshakable conviction born of inexperience and fervent idealism, that his path to true fulfillment, to genuine wealth, lay in the realm of ideas, in the exercise of power, in the shaping of public opinion, in the profound impact he could have on the destiny of his nation. His mind was a restless engine, perpetually seeking new horizons, new challenges, new realms to conquer, driven by an almost messianic zeal. The day of his departure for St. Petersburg dawned crisp and clear. The air filled with the invigorating promise of a new beginning, a clean slate. The entire household gathered in the courtyard, their faces a mixture of solemnity, quiet anticipation, and unspoken apprehension. His mother, Maria Alexeyevna, embraced him tightly, her delicate frame trembling, her eyes filled with unshed tears, murmuring fervent prayers for his safety and spiritual well-being. Pressing the small icon into his hand, Pavel, his elder brother, usually reserved, offered a gruff, affectionate farewell, his hand firm on Konstantin's shoulder, a silent plea for his safe return to the land they both loved, albeit for vastly different reasons. Konstantin looked out at the familiar landscape of Otradnoy, the sprawling fields, already shimmering with the nascent green of spring, the distant, dark forests, the humble izbas of the peasants, their lives unfolding in quiet, unchanging rhythm. He felt a fleeting pang of nostalgia, A whisper of connection to the simplicity he was leaving behind. A faint recognition of a life of profound, yet unglamorous, worth. But this was swiftly overshadowed by the exhilarating rush of anticipation. The boundless promise of the future. He imagined the grand avenues of Petersburg. The bustling salons filled with witty conversation. The intellectual debates in smoky cafes. The boundless opportunities for a mind like his to truly flourish. To make his indelible mark on the vast canvas of the imperial capital. He climbed into the waiting carriage. His small trunk containing his carefully selected books and his meager belongings. A symbolic lightness to his worldly possessions, contrasting with the immense weight of his ambitions. The driver, a grizzled peasant named Fyodor, who had known Konstantin since his birth, clucked to the horses, and the carriage lurched forward. Slowly at first, then picking up speed, rattling down the long, familiar drive. Konstantin turned, catching a last glimpse of Otradnoy, of his family standing there. Their figures growing smaller against the backdrop of the ancient manor, diminishing with each revolution of the wheels. He waved, a final, confident gesture, then turned forward, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, on the distant, glittering promise of the city, on the beckoning allure of his grand designs. The journey was long, tedious, a physical manifestation of the immense distance between the rustic simplicity of Otradnoy and the sophisticated complexity of Petersburg. As the carriage rolled over uneven roads, through quaint, unremarkable villages and vast, empty plains, Konstantin's mind was a whirlwind of philosophical speculation, of grand plans, of a future he was convinced he would shape with his intellect and his will. He imagined himself debating with the great thinkers of the day, drafting enlightened policies in the bureaucratic halls, his name whispered with respect in the salons of the powerful. He believed, with an unshakable conviction born of inexperience and fervent idealism, that his path to true fulfillment, to genuine wealth, lay in the realm of ideas, in the exercise of power, in the shaping of public opinion, in the profound impact he could have on the destiny of his nation. The simple, unadorned life of his ancestral estate seemed utterly insufficient, a mere prologue to the grand narrative he was destined to write. A narrative of intellectual triumphs and societal influence. His youth, his boundless optimism, and his nascent intellectual arrogance fueled his dreams of making a significant mark on the world. He saw himself as a reformer, a visionary, one who would bring the light of reason and progress to a Russia still steeped in ancient traditions and deeply ingrained inequalities. He envisioned himself contributing to the abolition of serfdom, to the establishment of true justice, to the enlightenment of the masses through education and enlightened policy. These were not mere selfish ambitions, they were, in his youthful idealism, noble pursuits, driven by a genuine desire for societal good, for the betterment of humanity. He truly believed that the highest form of wealth lay in the accumulation of knowledge, the wielding of influence, and the power to shape the destiny of others, to move the very levers of history. The peasant drivers and villagers he encountered along the way, their lives simple and seemingly unburdened by intellectual complexities, appeared almost alien to him, like figures from a forgotten painting. He observed their quiet toil, their humble dwellings, their unhurried pace of life, and while he felt a vague sense of paternalistic benevolence, a duty to their welfare, he could not conceive of finding true fulfillment, true meaning, in such a narrow existence. Their wealth, he thought, was merely the temporary bounty of the earth, subject to the whims of nature, a precarious existence. His wealth, he believed, would be eternal, forged in the crucible of his mind, secure in the unassailable fortress of his intellect and his inevitable societal position. A lasting contribution to the grand intellectual currents of his time. As the carriage finally rumbled into the sprawling outskirts of St. Petersburg, the sheer scale of the city overwhelmed his senses. The endless rows of grand stone buildings, their facades gleaming, the bustling streets teeming with elegant carriages and elegantly dressed men and women. The distant murmur of countless voices, it was a sensory explosion. A deafening symphony of urban life that dwarfed anything he had ever known. A profound contrast to the quiet of Otradnoy. The air, though heavier with the scent of industry and human congestion, vibrated with an electric energy, a promise of boundless possibilities, a vital pulse that invigorated his very soul. The vastness of the city, Its intricate complexity, its very anonymity amidst the throng, thrilled him, filling him with a sense of boundless potential, a dizzying anticipation of the mark he would leave. He imagined himself disappearing into this intricate labyrinth, to emerge transformed, a man of profound power and undeniable influence, whose ideas would ripple through the very fabric of society, shaping its future. He looked at the grand imperial palaces, their gilded domes glinting in the pale sunlight, the majestic cathedrals, their spires piercing the sky, the imposing government buildings, their solid stone walls embodying power, and felt a profound conviction that his true place was within those hallowed walls. Among the architects of Russia's future, among the intellectual elite, he was ready to claim his inheritance, not of land or rubles, but of intellect, power, and societal influence, believing, with the fervent, unwavering conviction of his youth, that this was the sole path to true wealth and enduring purpose. To a life of profound significance. The tranquil stillness of Otradnoy, the quiet wisdom of the earth, the comforting simplicity of peasant life, seemed already a distant, forgotten dream, a mere prologue to the grand narrative that awaited him in the gleaming promise of the city. A future he was certain would be shaped by his boundless ambition and his formidable mind. Chapter 2. The glittering facade of society and the seeds of doubt. The carriage, rattling through the grand, wide avenues of St. Petersburg, had delivered Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov into a world of intoxicating brilliance, a dazzling spectacle that, at first glance, seemed to embody all the promise he had so fervently yearned for. The monumental stone buildings, their classical facades gleaming under the northern sky, stood in stark contrast to the rambling wooden manor of Otradnoy, proclaiming a grandeur, an enduring power, that instantly captured his ambitious imagination. The bustling streets, teeming with elegant carriages, officers in resplendent uniforms, and women adorned in the latest Parisian fashions, vibrated with an electric energy, a ceaseless hum of vital activity that utterly dwarfed the quiet rhythms of his provincial upbringing. This was the beating heart of Russia, the very crucible of its future. And Konstantin, with his boundless intellect and his fervent, youthful idealism, felt a profound conviction that his place was here, amidst the architects of a new age. His initial immersion in Petersburg's high society was swift and exhilarating. Armed with letters of introduction from his urbane uncle Dmitri and the venerable name of Volkov, Konstantin found himself swiftly propelled into a dizzying whirl of balls, soirees, and receptions. The salons, with their gilded ceilings and shimmering chandeliers, were filled with a cacophony of witty conversation, the rustle of silk gowns, and the clink of crystal glasses. He observed the elegant dance of social interaction, the intricate rituals of etiquette, the subtle play of influence and reputation. He was introduced to counts and princesses, to generals and ministers, to men and women whose names resonated with power and prestige. Their conversation, often witty and superficially profound, touched upon literature, politics, and the latest gossip, all delivered with an effortless charm that both fascinated and subtly intimidated him. At first, Konstantin was utterly captivated. He reveled in the intellectual sparring, the rapid-fire exchanges of ideas that seemed to sparkle like diamonds. He listened intently to the pronouncements of seasoned politicians and the critiques of celebrated artists, believing himself to be in the very epicenter of Russia's intellectual and cultural life. His quick mind and earnest engagement earned him polite attention, and he found a fleeting satisfaction in the subtle admiration in the eyes of his new acquaintances. This, he thought, was true living, a life of endless intellectual stimulation and boundless opportunity, a stark contrast to the quiet stagnation of Otradnoy. Yet, even in the midst of this dazzling spectacle, subtle hints of disillusionment began to form, like tiny cracks appearing on a perfectly polished mirror. He began to observe the superficiality that lay beneath the glittering facade. The witty conversations, he slowly realized, rarely delved beyond clever turns of phrase or polite pleasantries. They skimmed the surface of ideas. Fearing true depth or genuine conviction, opinions were often borrowed, quickly adopted from the most fashionable intellectual currents of the day, rather than forged through genuine thought or felt experience. The seemingly profound discussions often devolved into mere gossip, into polite skirmishes of reputation and social standing. The earnestness he brought from his provincial studies, his genuine desire for truth, often felt out of place, almost clumsy amidst the delicate dance of social artifice. He listened to men speak eloquently of justice and compassion, then observed them treat their own serfs with casual cruelty, their words a hollow echo against their actions. His immersion in intellectual circles at the university and in select salons initially thrilled him. He attended lectures by renowned professors, their minds sharp and their arguments intricate, delving into the great philosophical questions of existence, morality, and social order. He joined student societies and frequented literary gatherings, eager to engage in the fervent debates that shaped the intellectual landscape of the capital. Here, he believed, he would find true intellectual companionship, souls equally devoted to the pursuit of truth and progress. He spoke passionately of Kant's categorical imperative, of Rousseau's social contract, of Voltaire's enlightened reason, believing these ideas held the keys to unlocking Russia's future. But here too, the seeds of doubt began to sprout. He observed a peculiar kind of intellectual vanity, a competition not for truth, but for brilliance of argument, for the most striking turn of phrase, for the intellectual triumph over an opponent. Debates, which he had imagined as sincere searches for understanding, often degenerated into mere displays of erudition, exercises in rhetorical gymnastics, where victory lay not in profound insight but in cunning sophistry. Professors, for all their vast knowledge, sometimes seemed more concerned with the maintenance of their own reputations than with the genuine pursuit of knowledge. He saw intellectual dishonesty, men defending positions not out of conviction, but out of a desire for advancement or social approval. He perceived a pervasive disconnect between the lofty ideals discussed in lecture halls and the practical, often morally compromised, realities of life outside. The pursuit of pure reason, which he had believed to be an unblemished path, seemed tainted by human vanity and ambition, revealing a moral compromise even in the realm of the mind. His entry into bureaucratic life in one of the imperial ministries proved to be the most potent catalyst for his dawning disillusionment. He had imagined himself wielding influence, drafting enlightened policies, contributing directly to the betterment of the nation. The government buildings, grand and imposing, initially filled him with awe, symbols of the Tsar's absolute authority and the vast machinery of state. His office, small but dignified, felt like a launching pad for his grand designs. He approached his duties with a fierce dedication, meticulously studying regulations, drafting clear and concise reports, eager to prove his worth. The daily routine, however, quickly proved to be a soul-crushing monotony. The work was not about grand policy or profound societal change, but about endless paperwork, meticulous adherence to arcane regulations, and the constant, suffocating grind of bureaucratic procedure. He saw corruption, subtle and pervasive, woven into the very fabric of the ministry. Decisions were made not for the good of the nation, but for personal gain, for the advancement of cliques, for the maintenance of power. He observed officials who seemed utterly indifferent to the human consequences of their actions. Men who moved papers with a cold, unthinking efficiency, their faces masks of practiced indifference. He witnessed intrigues behind closed doors, whispered conspiracies, and petty jealousies that seemed to consume more energy than the actual work of governing. Promotions were often based not on merit, but on connections, on flattery, on the subtle art of navigating the treacherous currents of court politics. Young men, initially fervent in their idealism, quickly learned to shed their principles, to compromise their integrity, to adopt the cynical detachment that characterized the Petersburg bureaucracy. The moral compromises, small at first, then larger and more insidious, became the daily bread of official life. Konstantin, who had believed in the inherent goodness of institutions, in the power of enlightened governance, found himself suffocating in an atmosphere of pervasive cynicism and moral decay. His youthful idealism, so robust in the quiet solitude of Otradnoy, began to wither under the relentless assault of bureaucratic reality. He began to feel a profound sense of alienation, a growing awareness of the vast disparity between his ideals and reality. The Petersburg he had dreamed of, a vibrant hub of intellectual fervor and righteous governance, was, in truth, a glittering facade, a gilded cage of superficiality, intrigue, and moral compromise. The wealth he had sought, the wealth of intellect, power, and societal influence, felt increasingly empty, tainted by hypocrisy and self-interest. The debates in the salons were hollow. The intellectual pursuits in the university seemed to serve vanity more than truth, and the bureaucracy was a stagnant swamp of corruption and petty ambition. Konstantin would return to his small, rented rooms in the evenings, exhausted not merely by the physical demands of his day, but by a profound spiritual fatigue. He would gaze out his window at the grand, imposing architecture of the city, now seeing not grandeur, but an oppressive weight, a cold, indifferent monument to human vanity. The bustling streets, once so exhilarating, now seemed to pulse with a ceaseless, meaningless activity, a frantic dance of superficial desires. He would open his philosophical texts, seeking solace in the abstract purity of reason, but the words felt distant, detached, utterly disconnected from the suffocating realities he encountered each day. Kant's categorical imperatives seemed to mock him. Rousseau's social contract felt like a cruel fantasy. He found himself spending more time alone, withdrawing from the very society he had so eagerly sought to conquer. The conversations with his peers, once stimulating, now felt shallow, their ambitions petty, their concerns trivial. He observed them with a growing sense of detachment, noting their polished manners, their clever words, and the profound emptiness that often lay beneath. He saw their desperate pursuit of pleasure, their relentless striving for social status, and recognized in it a frantic attempt to fill a spiritual void, a hunger that no amount of external gratification could truly satisfy. The seeds of doubt, once subtle, now began to sprout, sending their roots deep into his soul, threatening to unravel the very fabric of his worldview. He questioned everything he had believed about the city, about society, about the true nature of human progress. He remembered his father's words, spoken with a weary prescience: the city promises much, but often delivers only emptiness. He saw now, with a chilling clarity, the truth of those words. The wealth he had come to seek, the wealth of intellect, power, and influence, was a mirage, a fleeting illusion that left a bitter taste in his mouth. His own intellectual arrogance, which had fueled his initial ambition, now turned inward, becoming a source of torment. He had believed his mind capable of discerning truth, of navigating the complexities of the world, of shaping it for the better. But Petersburg had shown him the limits of pure intellect, the corrupting influence of human nature, the pervasive power of hypocrisy and self-interest. He felt himself a fool, a naive provincial, whose lofty ideals had been crushed by the grinding reality of urban life. He wrestled with these profound questions in the solitude of his rooms, the silence often broken only by the distant sounds of the city, a low, incessant hum that seemed to mock his inner turmoil. What was the purpose of his life? What was the meaning of his existence if all the grand pursuits of the city led only to superficiality and disillusionment? He had left the simplicity of Otradnoy seeking a higher truth, a greater purpose, but he seemed to have found only emptiness, a profound void that echoed the vast indifference of the universe. The once vibrant intellectual circles now seemed barren, their debates sterile, their participants caught in a web of academic vanity and intellectual dishonesty. The bureaucracy, far from being a vehicle for enlightenment, was a stagnant swamp of corruption and petty ambition, its power wielded by men devoid of principle. High society, with its glittering facade, revealed itself as a hollow shell, its inhabitants dancing a frantic, meaningless jig of social artifice. Konstantin's profound disillusionment grew, a slow, consuming fire that burned away his youthful idealism, leaving behind a profound cynicism. He thought of Otradnoy, of the vast, honest simplicity of the earth, of the quiet toil of the peasants, of his father's unwavering connection to the land. He had dismissed that life as narrow, provincial, insufficient for a mind like his. But now, in the suffocating emptiness of Petersburg, that simple existence seemed imbued with a profound dignity, a genuine truth that he had scorned. The land, his father had said, was honest. It hid nothing. Its rewards are hard won, but they are real. The city's rewards, he realized, were fleeting, deceptive, and ultimately, meaningless. His ambition, once a guiding star, now felt like a cruel master, having led him into a labyrinth of disillusionment. He had yearned to make a mark, to wield influence, to discover true wealth in intellect and power. But the city had taught him a harsh lesson, that power corrupted. That influence was often bought with compromise. And that intellect, when divorced from genuine morality and human connection, could lead to a sterile, empty existence. The seeds of doubt had taken root, and their bitter fruit was a profound, pervasive disillusionment that threatened to consume him entirely, leaving him adrift in a vast, spiritual wilderness, far from the gleaming promise he had once so eagerly pursued. Chapter 3. Ambition's Ascent and the First Taste of Bitterness. The initial dazzling brilliance of St. Petersburg had begun to soften for Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, subtly revealing the intricate, often treacherous, currents that flowed beneath its glittering facade. Yet, even as the first seeds of doubt had been sown in his discerning mind, they had not yet taken root deep enough to wither the robust plant of his youthful ambition. Indeed, the very challenges of the city, its intricate social dances, its labyrinthine bureaucracy, its fiercely competitive intellectual circles, only served to sharpen his resolve, steel his intellect, and propel him further into the pursuit of the grand designs he had envisioned in the quiet solitude of Otrotnoy. He had come to claim his inheritance, not of land, but of influence and intellect, and he pursued it with the tireless fervor of a man convinced of his destiny. Konstantin's ascent in his chosen career paths was, at first, swift and undeniably promising. In the academic halls of the university, where he had enrolled to continue his philosophical studies, his brilliance shone with an almost blinding clarity. His mind, quick and incisive, devoured complex texts. His arguments in debates were sharp and compelling, and his written papers, though sometimes too earnest for the jaded professors, displayed an originality and depth that marked him as exceptional. He distinguished himself swiftly, earning the quiet respect of his professors and the open admiration of his peers. He found a profound, if fleeting, satisfaction in the intellectual triumphs, in the validation of his prodigious mind, in the recognition of his superior intellect. He was invited to present his work at exclusive philosophical societies, where his reasoned critiques of established thought, delivered with a charming earnestness that belied his intellectual ferocity, earned him a growing reputation as a rising star, a potential luminary in the intellectual firmament of the capital. Simultaneously, his initial forays into bureaucratic life in the Ministry of Justice, arranged through his uncle Dmitri's connections, also met with early success. He approached his duties not with the cynical detachment he had observed in many of his colleagues, but with a fervent dedication, believing, in his youthful idealism, that even the most mundane administrative tasks could contribute to the greater good, to the eventual enlightenment of the nation. He meticulously studied regulations, drafting clear and concise reports, his logical mind quickly grasping the complexities of the legal system. His superiors, initially viewing him as just another well-connected young nobleman, soon recognized his unusual diligence and formidable intelligence. He was assigned increasingly complex cases. His recommendations were often considered, and he found himself, to his quiet satisfaction, climbing the lower rungs of the bureaucratic ladder with a speed that many older, more seasoned officials might envy. He reveled in the subtle sense of power, the feeling that his actions, however small, were part of the vast machinery shaping the destiny of Russia. He experienced, in these early days, the fleeting satisfaction of ambition fulfilled, the admiration in the eyes of his academic peers, the respectful nods of his bureaucratic superiors, the flattering invitations to exclusive salons where his wit and intelligence were genuinely appreciated. All these fed his youthful pride. Confirming his belief that he had chosen the right path, he indulged in the intellectual debates in the university, the intricate dance of Petersburg society, the quiet sense of influence within the ministry, believing that these were the true markers of a life well lived, a life of purpose. He acquired a tasteful apartment, a modest but well-stocked library, and a small circle of like-minded acquaintances who shared his intellectual pursuits. This was the life he had dreamed of, a life of intellect, power, and influence, utterly superior to the quiet, unthinking existence of the provincial gentry. Yet, even in the midst of this apparent triumph, The seeds of doubt that had been sown in Chapter 2 subtly grew, nurtured by a pervasive unease that whispered at the edges of his consciousness. The satisfaction, while undeniable, was always fleeting. Each intellectual victory, each bureaucratic advancement, left him with a subtle, unfulfilled longing, a sense that the true essence of purpose remained elusive. The admiration of others, while pleasant, felt hollow, easily gained and just as easily lost, often dependent on the superficiality of one's wit or the cleverness of one's argument, rather than on any profound, enduring truth. He noticed that even in his academic circles, intellectual honesty often yielded to academic vanity, and arguments were won not by conviction, but by cunning rhetoric. In the bureaucracy, he observed that promotions were often based not on genuine merit, but on patronage, on flattery, on the ruthless art of navigating the treacherous currents of court politics. The initial gleam of the city began to dull, revealing a tarnished underbelly. The first significant taste of bitterness arrived not as a sudden, cataclysmic event, but as a slow, insidious realization, a profound moral compromise that forced him to confront the true cost of his ambition and the inherent emptiness of purely worldly achievements. It began subtly. In his work at the Ministry of Justice, Konstantin had been assigned to a committee examining petitions from provincial landowners regarding disputes with their serfs. He approached the cases with his characteristic thoroughness, meticulously studying the evidence, applying the letter of the law with an earnest desire for justice. His logical mind often found in favor of the serfs, recognizing the blatant injustices perpetrated by corrupt or neglectful landowners. His meticulously prepared reports, however, were often met with polite but firm resistance from his superior, Count Fyodor Alexeyevich, a man of immense charm and polished manners, but with eyes that held a cold, cynical detachment. Count Fyodor, who had once praised Konstantin's promising intellect, would subtly guide him towards a different interpretation, a more practical application of the law that inevitably favored the landowner, particularly if that landowner held significant influence in court circles. "My dear Konstantin Nikolaevich," Count Fyodor would say, his voice smooth as silk, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, "your zeal is commendable, truly. A mind such as yours, so unburdened by the complexities of tradition, sees only the pure ideal. But the law, my friend, is not merely a collection of abstract principles. It is a living, breathing organism, intertwined with the very fabric of our society, with the delicate balance of power and influence. Justice, in practice, is often a matter of expediency, of maintaining order, of placating the powerful." Konstantin, initially bewildered, then increasingly disturbed, argued with passionate conviction, citing legal precedents, philosophical principles of equity, but Count Fyodor would only smile. A knowing, condescending expression, "My dear boy, in Petersburg, one learns that conviction, while admirable, must sometimes yield to prudence. There are considerations, family connections, obligations. These are the unseen levers of power. To ignore them is to be, shall we say, impractical, and to be impractical, my dear fellow, is to be utterly ineffective in the grand theater of public service." The implication was clear. If Konstantin wished to advance, to truly wield influence, he must learn to compromise his principles, to bend the law when expediency demanded it. He watched as Count Fyodor subtly altered his carefully drafted reports, inserting phrases that subtly shifted the legal interpretation, transforming clear injustice into a nuanced dispute that could be resolved in favor of the powerful. He witnessed decisions made not for the good of the serfs, but for the continued favor of a wealthy prince, a prominent general, an influential courtier. The justifications were always cloaked in the language of order and stability, of avoiding unnecessary complications. But the true motive was naked self-interest and the maintenance of power. This daily reality was a slow, agonizing poison to Konstantin's youthful idealism. He had believed in the inherent goodness of institutions, in the power of enlightened governance to bring about justice. But here, in the very heart of the Ministry of Justice, he saw only hypocrisy, corruption, and a pervasive indifference to human suffering. The gap between the lofty ideals of philosophy and the brutal reality of power was not merely vast, it was an unbridgeable chasm. He was faced with a stark choice: to compromise his integrity and climb the ladder of influence, or to cling to his principles and remain a powerless, ineffectual idealist. The bitterness intensified with a particular case, one that involved a particularly egregious abuse of power by a powerful provincial landowner, Prince Oblonsky, against a group of his serfs. The evidence was overwhelming, the injustice blatant. Konstantin, with his characteristic thoroughness, prepared a damning report, detailing the prince's illegal actions and recommending severe penalties. He truly believed that this was his opportunity to demonstrate the power of justice, to prove that his ideals could indeed effect change. He presented his findings to Count Fyodor, his heart swelling with a righteous indignation he had never felt before. Count Fyodor listened politely, his expression unreadable. Then, with a practiced sigh, he dismissed Konstantin's findings with a wave of his hand. "My dear Konstantin Nikolaevich," he said, his voice laced with a subtle weariness, "you are indeed a man of principle. A rare quality. But Prince Oblonsky, he is connected. Deeply connected. His family holds considerable sway at court. To pursue this matter, as you suggest, would be inadvisable. It would cause a great deal of unpleasantness, disrupt the delicate balance of things. It would, I assure you, be a grave disservice to your own promising career, and ultimately, to the stability of the ministry itself," Konstantin argued, his voice passionate, citing the undeniable facts, the moral imperative. But Count Fyodor only smiled, a cold, empty expression that chilled Konstantin to the bone. "The facts, my young friend, are often inconvenient, and moral imperatives, in the real world, rarely outweigh political expediency. This case, I regret to inform you, is closed. The ministry will find a more harmonious solution." The solution, Konstantin soon discovered, was a quiet, almost imperceptible manipulation of the evidence, a reinterpretation of the facts, a subtle shifting of blame that utterly exonerated Prince Oblonsky and placed the blame, subtly, on the rebellious serfs. The outcome was a profound injustice, a grotesque perversion of the very principles he had sworn to uphold. Konstantin was ordered to sign off on the revised report, his name to appear as a co-author. This was the moment of his profound moral compromise. His hand trembled as he took up the pen. His mind screamed in protest. Every philosophical ideal he had ever cherished, every principle of justice and truth, recoiled from the act. To sign was to betray himself, to betray his deepest convictions, to become a part of the very system he had vowed to reform. But to refuse was to invite ruin, to alienate his powerful superior, to jeopardize his nascent career, to face the cold indifference of a system that would simply crush him and move on. He had come to Petersburg to make a mark, to wield influence, to achieve greatness, and now, the cost of that ambition was the sacrifice of his integrity. With a profound sense of self-loathing, Konstantin signed his name. The ink, black and unforgiving, seemed to burn on the parchment. He felt a part of himself wither, a piece of his youthful idealism irrevocably lost. The act was small, perhaps, in the grand scheme of imperial bureaucracy. But for Konstantin, it was a profound spiritual defeat, a betrayal of the very essence of his being. He returned to his apartment that evening, the city's grand architecture now seeming to mock him with its cold, impersonal beauty. The bustling streets, once a source of exhilarating energy, now felt oppressive, their constant movement a metaphor for the relentless, unthinking machinery of a society devoid of true principle. He gazed out his window at the glittering lights of Petersburg, lights that had once promised boundless opportunity, and saw now only a hollow, deceptive gleam, a glittering facade that concealed a pervasive moral decay. His philosophical texts, once companions in his quest for truth, now lay scattered on his desk, their words cold and sterile. Kant's categorical imperative, once so clear and compelling, now felt like a cruel irony. Rousseau's social contract, a blueprint for an ideal society, seemed utterly divorced from the corrupt realities of Petersburg. The pursuit of pure reason, which he had believed to be an unblemished path to enlightenment, now seemed tainted by the inescapable compromises of human ambition. He felt himself utterly adrift, unmoored from the anchors of his former beliefs. The emptiness of purely worldly achievements now settled upon him with a crushing weight. He had climbed the ladder, gained recognition, wielded a small measure of influence. But the satisfaction had been fleeting. And the cost, his integrity, was profound. The wealth he had sought, the wealth of intellect, power, and societal influence, felt utterly meaningless. A hollow echo in the vast void of his disillusionment. His grand designs, which had once fueled his every action, now lay in ruins, shattered by the collision of his ideals with the brutal, unyielding reality of the city. He spent days in a profound, internal despair, withdrawing from his social circle, neglecting his bureaucratic duties. His academic pursuits, once a source of vibrant engagement, now seemed sterile, their debates pointless. He saw the vanity in the pursuit of intellectual triumph, the emptiness of a knowledge divorced from genuine moral conviction. He remembered his father's words, spoken with a weary prescience years ago: "The city promises much, but often delivers only emptiness. Its wealth is often an illusion, its power a fleeting shadow. Remember the earth, Konstantin. It is honest, it hides nothing, its rewards are hard-won, but they are real." He saw now, with a chilling clarity, the profound truth of those words. The simple, unadorned life of Otrotnoy, which he had so scorned, now seemed imbued with a profound dignity, a genuine honesty that the city utterly lacked. His ambition, once a guiding star, now felt like a cruel master, having led him into a labyrinth of profound disillusionment. He had yearned to make a mark, to wield influence, to discover true wealth in intellect and power. But Petersburg had taught him a harsh, unforgiving lesson: that power corrupted, that influence was often bought with compromise, and that intellect, when divorced from genuine morality and human connection, could lead to a sterile, empty existence. The seeds of doubt had fully taken root, and their bitter fruit was a profound, pervasive disillusionment that threatened to consume him entirely, leaving him utterly adrift in a vast, spiritual wilderness, far from the gleaming promise he had once so eagerly pursued. His ascent had led him not to triumph, but to a profound taste of bitterness, a realization that the true cost of his ambition was far greater than any reward it offered. Chapter 4. The Crumbling Towers, a Crisis of Purpose. The bitter taste of disillusionment, which had subtly tainted Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov's early successes in Petersburg, had now swelled into a profound, suffocating tide, threatening to drown him entirely. The glittering facade of society, the sterile debates of intellectual circles, and the pervasive corruption of bureaucratic life, once perceived as mere imperfections, had now revealed themselves as the very essence of a world fundamentally devoid of true purpose or integrity. Konstantin, who had arrived in the capital with a boundless ambition and a fervent, youthful idealism, believing true wealth lay in intellect, power, and societal influence, found himself standing amidst the ruins of his own grand designs. The seeds of doubt had fully blossomed, their fruit a profound, pervasive cynicism that gnawed at his soul, preparing the ground for a profound crisis that would shatter the very foundations of his existence. The crisis, when it finally arrived, was not a sudden, cataclysmic explosion, but a slow, agonizing implosion, a public unraveling that exposed the hollowness of his pursuits and the profound moral compromises he had unwillingly made. It began with the culmination of the Prince Oblonsky affair, the egregious case of serf abuse in which Konstantin had been forced to compromise his principles. Despite his profound discomfort and inner turmoil, he had signed the falsified report, allowing Prince Oblonsky to escape justice, a silent act of betrayal against his own conscience. He had justified it as a necessary evil, a painful but unavoidable step on the ladder of influence, a temporary concession for a greater future good. But the universe, in its relentless impartiality, often holds men accountable for even their quietest betrayals. The retribution, when it came, was meticulously orchestrated, a testament to the intricate and brutal nature of Petersburg's political intrigues. Prince Oblonsky, a man of boundless arrogance and vengeful spirit, had, it turned out, held a long-standing grudge against Count Fyodor Alexeyevich, Konstantin's superior. The prince, having used Count Fyodor to absolve himself, then chose to expose the manipulation, not to seek justice for the serfs, but to undermine his rival. The scandal erupted with chilling precision, a public humiliation designed to ruin Count Fyodor. But Konstantin, by virtue of his signature on the fabricated report, found himself inextricably entangled in the web of deceit. The official inquiry was swift and merciless. Konstantin, whose earnestness had once been seen as a virtue, was now portrayed as a naive fool, easily manipulated, or worse, a willing accomplice in a blatant miscarriage of justice. His meticulously crafted report, once a source of pride, was now evidence of his corruption. His intellectual prowess twisted into a tool for deceit. He was summoned before a panel of grim-faced officials, their gazes cold and accusatory. Count Fyodor, meanwhile, with a practiced art of self-preservation, deftly deflected blame, painting Konstantin as the ambitious, misguided junior official who had exceeded his authority. The very man who had forced Konstantin's hand now abandoned him to the wolves. It was a profound betrayal, cold and calculating, that left Konstantin reeling, his trust in human nature, already fragile, utterly shattered. The news spread like wildfire through the salons and intellectual circles that Konstantin had so eagerly cultivated. His name, once whispered with polite admiration, was now spoken with a mixture of scorn, pity, and thinly veiled contempt. He was branded as naive, as foolishly ambitious, as compromised, as a man who had failed to grasp the true, cynical rules of the city. Invitations ceased. Acquaintances who had once sought his company now averted their gazes. His promising career in the Ministry of Justice evaporated, leaving him disgraced, his name sullied, his path to influence utterly blocked. His public failure, brutal and absolute, was a fall from grace that stripped him bare of all his hard-won achievements. Konstantin retreated to his apartment, the city's usual roar now a mocking chorus outside his window. He lay on his bed for days, a profound despair settling over him like a suffocating blanket. His body ached with a weariness that transcended physical exhaustion, a deep spiritual fatigue that permeated his very bones. His mind, once a restless engine of thought, now felt numb, paralyzed by the sheer weight of his humiliation and the crushing realization of his utter failure. He had pursued ambition with every fiber of his being, only to find it a treacherous mirage, leading him not to glory, but to ruin. He found himself questioning the very foundations of his life's pursuits. His ambition, once a guiding star, now seemed a monstrous, devouring beast that had consumed his integrity and left him with nothing but ashes. What was the purpose of striving, of climbing, if the summit offered only a view of one's own moral wreckage? He had believed in the power of intellect to navigate complexities, to shape destiny, but his intellect, in the end, had proved powerless against the currents of corruption and human depravity. It had become merely a tool for his own advancement, then a weapon turned against him. The very energy he had poured into his ascent now seemed a wasted, futile effort, leaving him drained and utterly depleted. The pursuit of wealth, in all its forms, material possessions, social standing, intellectual prestige, now appeared utterly meaningless. A cruel joke. He looked at his carefully acquired philosophical texts, the very symbols of his intellectual inheritance, and they seemed sterile, their abstract words utterly disconnected from the brutal reality of his spiritual emptiness. The elegant furniture, the fine clothes, the expensive food, all the trappings of the life he had sought, now felt like a grotesque mockery. Hollow shells devoid of genuine comfort or purpose. What was the value of worldly possessions when the soul was in ruins? What was the meaning of social status when integrity was lost? He saw the frantic dance of Petersburg society, once so alluring, now as a desperate, meaningless scramble for ephemeral advantages. A profound emptiness cloaked in glittering finery. His societal status, once the key to unlocking doors, was now irrevocably tarnished. He was no longer the promising young nobleman, he was the disgraced official. The naive idealist who had been crushed by the merciless machinery of the capital. The shame burned through him, a searing pain that twisted his gut. He remembered the quiet dignity of his father, Nikolai Petrovich, a man content with the tangible realities of his land, untouched by the moral compromises of Petersburg. He remembered his brother Pavel, whose simple, practical pursuits had seemed so pedestrian, yet whose life now appeared immeasurably more authentic, more grounded. The pursuit of social standing, he realized, was a treacherous climb up a crumbling tower, built on shifting sands of reputation and appearances. offering no true security, no genuine worth. Even the prevailing intellectual currents that had once so inspired him now offered no solace. Only further disillusionment. The grand philosophical systems he had so passionately studied, Kant's strict morality, Rousseau's ideals of a just society, Voltaire's enlightened reason, seemed utterly inadequate, powerless to explain or alleviate the profound moral decay he had witnessed and participated in. They were beautiful abstractions, perfect in their logical construction, but utterly divorced from the messy, corrupt, and often brutal realities of human nature. The pursuit of pure reason, which he had believed to be the highest calling, now felt sterile, incapable of providing answers to the existential void that consumed him. He questioned the very purpose of intellectual endeavor if it could not guide one through the moral labyrinth of real life, if it could not offer true meaning or solace in the face of despair. He saw the intellectual circles as mere echo chambers, their debates often driven by vanity rather than a genuine search for truth, their proponents more concerned with rhetorical victory than moral illumination. Konstantin found himself in a profound crisis of purpose. The entire edifice of his life's pursuits had crumbled, leaving him adrift in a vast, spiritual wilderness. He had left Otradnoy seeking a higher truth, a greater purpose, a more meaningful inheritance than mere land and rubles. But he seemed to have found only emptiness, a profound void that echoed the vast indifference of the universe. The city, which had promised so much, had delivered only disillusionment, a bitter, soul-crushing revelation of its inherent hypocrisy and corruption. He spent his days in a state of profound inertia, his mind a chaotic swirl of self-reproach and existential questioning. He would sit for hours by his window, gazing at the majestic Neva River, its dark, cold waters flowing relentlessly towards the sea. He saw the grand palaces lining its banks, symbols of power and wealth, and now saw them as monuments to human vanity, their opulence a grotesque mockery of the suffering that lay beneath the surface of society. He thought of the endless human suffering he had glimpsed, the unseen victims of bureaucratic indifference, the serfs whose lives were cruelly twisted by the whims of men like Prince Oblonsky. His own complicity in that suffering, however small, burned like a hot coal in his conscience. The oppressive atmosphere of Petersburg seemed to magnify his despair. The perpetual gray skies, the damp, biting winds, the constant, low hum of the city's life, all seemed to weigh upon him, pressing down on his spirit. He felt utterly alone, isolated in his disillusionment, a solitary figure adrift in a vast, indifferent metropolis. He remembered the quiet peace of Otradnoy, the tangible honesty of the earth, the simple dignity of peasant life. He had scorned that life as provincial, as lacking the grand opportunities he craved. But now, in the suffocating emptiness of Petersburg, that humble existence seemed imbued with a profound truth, a genuine authenticity that the city utterly lacked. His father's words, "The earth, it is honest, it hides nothing, its rewards are hard-won, but they are real," echoed in his mind with a new, devastating clarity. He began to read differently, no longer seeking grand philosophical systems that promised universal truths, but desperate for any glimmer of meaning, any path out of his spiritual abyss. He turned to ancient texts, to religious scriptures, not with an intellectual curiosity, but with a raw, agonizing yearning for solace. He questioned the very existence of God, not with the academic detachment of a philosopher, but with the despairing cry of a soul in torment. If there was a benevolent God, how could he allow such a world, such suffering, such profound injustice? What was the purpose of it all? And if there was no God, then what was the meaning of existence itself? The void stretched before him, vast and terrifying. His body, too, reflected his profound internal collapse. He neglected his appearance, his clothes unkempt, his hair unruly, his appetite vanished, and his once robust frame grew thin. Sleep, when it came, was fitful, haunted by the specter of his failures and the ghosts of his lost ideals. He would lie awake for hours, wrestling with his conscience, replaying the moment he signed the falsified report, feeling the searing shame burn through him. He was a man utterly broken, his ambition having led him not to triumph, but to a profound, spiritual bankruptcy. The crisis was not merely intellectual or social, it was an existential one. Konstantin had believed in progress, in reason, in the power of man to shape his destiny. But Petersburg had shown him a different truth: the insidious power of corruption, the corrosive influence of self-interest, the profound limitations of human perfectibility. He saw society as a vast, intricate prison, its glittering facade merely a deceptive illusion. His inheritance, which he had believed to be intellect and ambition, now felt like a curse. Having led him to this precipice of despair, he felt a profound sense of self-loathing, a deep disgust for the man he had become. The naive provincial idealist had been corrupted, transformed into a cynical participant in a system he despised. The brilliance of his mind, which he had once seen as his greatest asset, now seemed a burden, a tool that had led him astray. He was adrift, unmoored from all his former anchors, lost in a spiritual wilderness, his purpose utterly shattered. This was the profound despair that marked Konstantin's crisis of purpose. The gleaming promise of the city had revealed itself to be a mirage, and its pursuit had led him not to true wealth, but to a vast, encompassing emptiness. The towers of his ambition had crumbled, leaving him amidst the debris of his shattered ideals, a man facing the stark, terrifying truth of his own profound disillusionment. He had sought wealth in the intellect, in power, in influence, and found only bitterness, a profound spiritual poverty. His journey had led him to an abyss, and now, from the depths of that abyss, he would either find a new path, or be consumed entirely by the overwhelming weight of his despair. Part 1 of the story ends here. Thank you and goodbye. See you again in the next part.